Okay, so I'm going to give a talk, and it may include some meditative explorations. And by meditative explorations, I mean explorations that we do with awareness or open attention rather than with thinking. And there may be some long pauses in the talk, so when I'm finished, I will let you know that I'm finished and open it up for questions. And I think, will you be moderating the questions, Emerson?
Yes, I am. So if people want to ask questions, they can raise their hand or unmute themselves. But ask first to raise your hand and I'll call them out.
Okay, so raise your hand using the raise hand feature, or?
That's right, yeah.
Oh, okay.
You can also type in their question via text so that I can read them.
Okay. Yeah, and so just so everybody knows, I am going to completely ignore the chat feature because I find it enormously distracting, and I urge everyone else to ignore it unless you want to ask a question that way, in which case you can type it in there and Emerson will read it. He'll be checking it. But if you want to send me a personal message, you can do that afterwards on my email, which is on my website, because I won't be looking at the chat. Okay. So, does everybody know how to do that, by the way, raising your hand and all that sort of thing? People are shaking their head, Emerson. You want to explain it? We can't hear you. I can't hear you.
If you want to raise your hand, there's a feature, or you can also simply type on the message and message me directly. There is a raise hand feature on the lower portion of your chat. And then I'll call your name and I'll ask you to unmute yourself. If you can't seem to find that, you can just simply type that I want to ask a question, and I'll also call out your name.
So in other words, you click on chat, wherever that is on your screen, but I don't see any raise hand feature on mine.
Oh, I will see that one.
What?
That's why I'm here. I'll see that one. I'll be the one that will be calling them out, Joan.
Okay, so I don't have a raise hand feature.
Oh no, because you're the speaker.
Oh. It means that I can speak anytime I want to.
That's right. That's right. You're a special guest, Joan.
Okay. All right.
If I can ask everybody to mute yourself so that Joan can do her talk, that'll be much appreciated. Thank you.
Okay. So just noticing being here and maybe feeling the breathing. And just noticing how we're breathing and how, in a way, the whole universe is breathing. It's appearing out of emptiness and disappearing back into emptiness, breath by breath by breath. And you might notice whatever's around you, the forms that you're seeing in the room where you are, the colors, the shapes, and just notice how undeniably present they are, how vividly, undeniably present. Even if you have poor vision and they're blurry, notice how vividly blurry they are, how vividly present the blurriness is. And whatever sounds you're hearing, the sound of this voice, maybe there are other sounds, traffic sounds, a bird chirping, a dog barking, children's voices, whatever you might be hearing, just notice how present that is, how undeniably present it is. And similarly, whatever's going on in the body, just notice whatever sensations are in the body, maybe sensations in the belly, or the chest, or the face, or the hands, or wherever, feet on the floor. And just again, notice how undeniably present and vividly present those sensations are. And then, oops, my email. I meant to shut that down so it won't ding. There. So there's a little sound, ding. And then maybe closing our eyes for a moment. And this will be one of those meditative explorations. And just see if you can actually find a boundary where inside turns into outside. Inside of you turns into outside of you. You can think of a boundary, you can picture one in your imagination, but just using open attention, just looking, feeling into it directly, can you actually find a boundary? Is there a boundary? Just take a moment to explore that. And then if you don't refer to thought or memory, right now in your direct experience, what are you? Again, we're not trying to come up with an answer. We're not thinking about this, but just in direct experience right now, if you don't refer to thought or memory, what are you? You may notice that you're just open space, presence, awareness. And does this space, this presence, this awareness have a gender or an age or a nationality or a life story or a history? And opening your eyes, you might notice that everything is appearing in this vast presence, this vast space of awareness. Everything that's showing up, including the image of your own body in the little square, including the image of this person called Joan, including the colors and shapes around you, including the sound of this voice and all the sounds and the sensations in the body. It's all appearing here in this presence, this space. And so we can notice that in our direct experience, at one and the same moment, we are this vast presence that is beholding and including and being everything. And at the same time, we are each an undeniably unique, distinct individual, a one of a kind, never to be repeated, ever changing, unique person. And yet this person is not a solid thing. When we think about ourselves, we think about ourselves being something solid and separate and persisting. But in actual experience, if we pay attention to just to sensations, to actual direct experience, we're not solid or separate or persisting. We're changing from moment to moment to moment. And we're inseparable from everything around us. We wouldn't be here without air, water, the whole universe really being the way it is. We're like a wave in the ocean, as many people have pointed out, but it's a wonderful metaphor. We're like a wave in the ocean. In other words, the wave is never separate from the ocean. It's never really separate from the other waves. And yet it is a distinct wave, but we can't really find exactly where it begins or where it ends. And it's a movement. It's always changing. You can't pin it down. You can't grab hold of it. And we're like that. Everything is like that. If we look closely, even something that seems solid, like a mountain, if we look closely at it, it's changing all the time too. And we can notice that although there are all kinds of distinct forms here, infinite shapes and colors and variations, at the same time, it's all showing up as one whole, seamless, undivided picture, like a movie. In a movie, there are many different shapes and colors, but they all show up as one whole movie. So at one and the same moment, right now, we are experiencing at the same time both wholeness and particularity, both wholeness, seamlessness, boundlessness, and particularity, distinctions, forms, multiplicity. They're both here at the same time in our direct experience. And we can notice that at the same time in our direct experience, there's impermanence and there's presence. Everything is impermanent, it's changing second, moment by moment by moment, it's changing, and yet it's always right here, right now. We never depart from right here, right now. And by here now, I mean now, the eternal now, not the present moment that goes by like that, but now, the eternal presence. It's always now, no matter what time of day it is or how old we are, it's always now. And we're always here in this presentness, this immediacy. If we travel from San Francisco to New York, San Francisco shows up here, the plane shows up here, the airport shows up here, New York shows up here. Every moment of our life happens here in this immediacy, this presentness. So at the same exact moment, we have both presence, immovable presence, and ever-changing impermanence. And we can look at what's here as ungraspable, momentary, or unresolvable sensations. The words are never it. Colors, feelings, whatever. And yet, we can't really deny memory and anticipation either. You know, like take music, for example. If all we had in music was the present moment, which is just like that, we would always, a piece of music, a great symphony would be nothing but you know, the beauty of it depends on our ability to remember what came before and to anticipate where it's going. That's part of how it works. And similarly, if we're watching a movie and all we had was just this flash of right now, the present moment, it wouldn't be much of a movie. In fact, you know, a good movie or a good play depends on our ability to remember what happened in the previous scenes and to kind of anticipate what might happen next. Similarly, if we're reading a novel, if all we had was like the experience of little black shapes on a page, meaningless little black appearances on a page, it wouldn't mean anything. But because we have this remarkable, really remarkable ability to instantly translate these little black marks into a whole world, we read a novel and it's meaningful. And another interesting thing to notice is that if you read the same book later, again, like a few years later, you might notice it's a different book. And if your friend reads the same book, you might have the experience that you've both read two different books or seen two different movies. And if you see a movie again years later, you might notice that it's a different movie, because we never actually, as someone once said, we never step into the same river twice. The person stepping is never the same twice. And we never read the same book twice or see the same movie twice, because again, it's always changing. And yet, however much it changes, it's always right here, right now, and it's always this undeniable presentness or presence. So the memory of the past notes, the anticipation of the future notes, it's all contained somehow. Past and future and present moment are all somehow contained right here, right now, in a way that we directly experience all the time. I mean, we think about it, it sounds confusing and mysterious, and we can get all, oh my God, what is my, but if we just, it's obvious, it's our experience in every moment that we have both wholeness and multiplicity. We have past and future all here at once. We have impermanence and we have immovable presence. And whenever we try to describe this living actuality that we're all experiencing right now, that we all are, whenever we try to describe it and put it into words or concepts, it inevitably, well, it's not what it's describing. It's inevitably an oversimplification, an abstraction, and it's always going to be partial or incomplete in some way. We can't actually grasp, just notice right now, this experiencing that's here right now, sensations, energy, sounds, this experience right here now, you can't grasp it. You can't get hold of it. We can put a label on it, like this is an event and somebody named Joan is speaking and we're looking at our computer screens or whatever, but that's not the aliveness of this, the reality of this can't be conceptualized or grasped. And so when we try to do that, we end up with these kind of because words are sort of inherently dualistic. I mean, as soon as you label something, here's a glass, and then immediately that separates that from everything that's not the glass. So words have this kind of immediate creation of dualism. And in fact, that you couldn't have this present manifestation without polarity, without, if it all was one glob of utter sameness, you wouldn't have any experience at all. So in fact, experience always shows up in polarities. You can't have up without down or light without dark. And one of the mistakes we make, particularly in the West, is that we have the idea that one polarity should triumph over the other one. The light should triumph over the dark, or the good should triumph over evil. And that's never going to happen, because it's always going to have those polarities in the appearance, and yet it's all one whole seamless event at the same time, like one whole movie. And so when we get into sort of having these ideas, we get into these kind of opposite ideas, like there is a self or there's no self, or there is something to do or there's nothing to do, or it's already perfect or there's some kind of process, or there's choice or there's no choice, or well, I don't know, various things like that, and then we take positions, and we have arguments with each other. The choice people argue with the no choice people. And it's kind of funny, really, because both are just conceptual abstractions of this living actuality. And we can't really say whether we have a choice or not. First of all, we can't really find who we're talking about. If you really look for, just open and close your hand. How are you doing that? Who's doing it? Are you choosing to do it? Is it happening choicelessly? You can't really say. On the one hand, of course you can choose to do it. On the other hand, if you start examining that, everything in the whole universe led up to you doing that at that moment. And how do you do it? You have no idea. And yet somehow you do it. And who's the you that's doing it? You look for that you and you can't find it. It doesn't seem to be there. So those are both, so you can say as a sort of teaching tool, if you want to put it that way, you can say that there's a choice, which can be helpful to people. I mean, when I sobered up from alcoholic drinking back in the 1970s, my therapist used the model of choice, she used the model that I had made an unconscious choice to destroy myself, and I could become conscious of that and then make a conscious choice to live in a different way. And our therapy was about looking into that and discovering that. And that was very helpful. And then I was with Tony Packer, a teacher who emphasized that there was you couldn't find the chooser. And if you really paid attention to how decisions happened moment to moment, you would see that they just happened, like you are making a decision and there's just these thoughts, do this, do that, do this, do that. And then all of a sudden doing this happens, and you can't really get hold of what created the decisive moment or and that was helpful too, because if you really believe that you have complete free will, then, inevitably you're going to feel like you've screwed an awful lot of things up and you could have done better. And you're also going to feel like everybody else in the world is screwing up a lot of things and could have done better and should be doing better. So if you really get that there isn't any choice, then that's very freeing. But at the same time, if you just sort of sit down on your couch and say, well, there's no choice, I'm just going to drink myself to death. There's no choice. There's no chooser. That's very disempowering in a way that's not helpful. So see all these formulations like self, no self, because of course there's something here that we call Joan. I mean, there's a personality, there's a body, there, and I mean, you look closely at the body and you can't really get hold of it, especially at the subatomic level. And the personality can change and so on, but there's certainly something here that we call Joan that in some way has some connection to Joan, the 2-year-old, although every cell in the body has changed. I'm not that 2-year-old anymore. And yet we can recognize somebody on the street that we haven't seen in 50 years. Because there's some kind of, it's like a whirlpool or a wave, there's some kind of pattern there, but it's not a solid thing. There's nothing in there that you can really get hold of. So we can't land on either of these abstractions, like there is a choice, there is no choice, there is a self, there is no self. And as soon as we do land on them, we get stuck in some way. And we can't land on just seeing, it's all just shapes and colors. It's all just shapes and colors. There's nothing, it doesn't mean anything. Well, yes, that's true. And and it means something. In as human beings, it means something. And human beings are a happening of the whole universe. We're not some sort of weird exception. Everything that we do is something the universe is doing. And then I want to mention that I subtitled my most recent book, Death, the End of Self-Improvement. I subtitled it, The End of Self-Improvement. And I was pointing to the kind of obsessive self-improvement that's rooted in deficiency stories, in that sort of fundamental sense of lack. As soon as we identify ourselves as this little separate, encapsulated me, inevitably we feel incomplete and lacking. And if we're, caught up in believing our thoughts about, I've ruined my life, I should have done this, I didn't do that, oh my God, what did I do there? Then, we feel this sense of lack and incompleteness, and that we're always trying to fill in various ways. And we're, sort of running away from death also. So we're like, if only I can exercise enough and go to enough workshops, maybe I will defy death and all of that. So so that was the kind of self-improvement I was pointing at, being a form of suffering, really. But I have a chapter in there on the difference between self-improvement and genuine transformation, as I called it. And because I think, on the one hand, this is it, right here, right now. And everything is complete and perfect just as it is. And there's no need for anything to happen. Nothing needs to happen. Nothing needs to be fixed or corrected or changed. And that is a wonderfully freeing thing to realize. But then it can become like one of those fixations again, where we get stuck on one side, because we seem to also have this, or at least many of us seem to have this aspiration to explore and to evolve. The universe seems to have this tendency to evolve. And that seems to be in each of us. And so I wrote something, it was an email to somebody, and I came upon it the other day, and I thought I'd read it. Because it expresses this kind of aspiration. And I had been talking to this person about how sort of the paradox of my concerns over political, social realities and this vastness, and sort of wanting to just let go into that. And so, and about how I noticed how, well, I've always noticed, maybe not always, but for a long time, I've noticed how defensive and upset I can get over these political and social questions. And so this is what I wrote. When I feel the tightening, the bristling, it is a signal that a nerve is being touched, that I am defending an illusion and fighting for my limitations. My deepest longing is to open the heart completely, to melt into God. Well, in case some of you don't like that word, I'll change it. To melt into presence, to let go of the controlling impulses that bind me to limitation and conflict, to surrender and let presence take me completely, to embody and serve the highest truth and not be caught up in what only produces more conflict and suffering. And I can feel that as my aspiration, which of course I will never achieve. It's like there's a vow in Buddhism, beings are endless, I vow to save them. It's an impossible vow, and yet it's our aspiration. It's what the universe moves toward, somehow. It's not about, and it's not really about achieving this and evaluating whether I'm achieving it or not, and then beating myself up for how totally I'm failing. But it's there as an aspiration. And it's the flip side of the coin from recognizing that nothing needs to change, nothing needs to happen. This is it, right here, right now. It's perfect just as it is. Shunryu Suzuki, a Zen teacher, sort of put it beautifully. He said, you're perfect just the way you are, and there's room for improvement. And again, I think it's important not to land on one side or the other, which is something I see happening a lot in the non-dual subculture. People seem to land on one of these fixations and then, get into a war over it with the people who have landed on the other side. And so I think that's about everything maybe that I have to say. So I will open it up, and Emerson can moderate and call on people or something, and we can have questions.
Thank you so much for that sharing, Joan. I really enjoyed it. I read your book, Death, The End of Self-Improvement. Wow, you're such a beautiful writer. I cried and cried and cried, especially the story about your mom. And as you know, I'm also I'm taking care of my mom right now who has cancer.
Mm.
And in the Emerson character, there was a point that I didn't want to see that. Like I didn't want that to happen, and a lot of avoidance, with the idea that my mom was going to die, and I had to stay strong, because I'm the eldest, of 5 children, so I had to keep it together, and really I was falling apart. It was really difficult, but that book should be made into a movie. Who should play you?
Well, Meryl Streep is the obvious.
That's what I was thinking. That's so obvious. Is that even a question, right? No, it's Meryl Streep. And again, in that story, there was a seeming kind of like dying of the character. You mentioned that aging and dying are like spiritual awakening. Can you expand on that?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, both aging and dying and awakening are, I mean, aging is a kind of stripping process. It's like we lose things. We lose physical abilities, we lose cognitive abilities, we lose friends, they die. We lose things. And in the end, we lose everything. And if you're thinking about this, especially if you're younger, it sounds pretty awful, like, oh no. Although when we're young, it's amazing, we're sort of in complete denial. I used to work at a law office, and we always laughed because people would come in to write a will in case they died, just in case. So awakening is a similar kind of stripping process in which we're seeing through various ideas and beliefs and things that we've kind of held on to, and death. When we really see the nature of this present reality, the fear of death just dissolves. I mean, there's still an instinctual fear of death. In other words, if I see a bus, barreling towards me, I'm going to have a moment of fear that shoots adrenaline through my body and helps me to get out of the way. But the psychological fear of death, where we worry about, oh my God, what will happen to me after I die? Will I, where will I go? Will I, I imagine that death will be, I don't know, of course, what will happen, but I imagine that it will be just like going to sleep at night or going under anesthesia, which I've done many times. And every time I go under anesthesia, I literally say out loud, here I go, because I can feel this conscious experiencing slipping away. And the next thing I know, I'm in the recovery room. And during the interval, or in deep sleep, the one who worries about what will happen to me after I die isn't there. The one who cares about that question, the one who's worried about, my God, I won't be able to get the TV back on and find out if Biden really does get into the White House, and what happens next in my life story, that character isn't there. That concern isn't there in deep sleep. And that doesn't mean to me that nothing is there after death. I mean, in the so-called material world, when an animal dies, it becomes food for other animals. It disintegrates into the soil. I mean, it's a continuous process. And consciousness, whatever consciousness is, I assume, as we were hopefully discovering earlier with trying to find a boundary between inside and outside, there really isn't one. This space when this body is gone, the space doesn't go, whereas the space isn't going to go anywhere. Consciousness is still here, but what I don't expect is that Joan is still going to be here, sort of being Joan and, twirling through the Bardos or something, or meeting my long gone relatives and pets or something. Now I could be surprised because I don't really know, but and it doesn't really matter to me because it feels more important to focus on what's right here, right now. But I think when we really experience and we actually are experiencing it every moment, whether we're aware of, whether we're recognizing it or not. But when we experience this vast wholeness, when we realize that we are the ocean, that we are a wave, but we are also the ocean, we are a movement of the ocean, then we're not worried anymore about what happens when the wave, goes back into the ocean. I mean, it's just not a concern. So, and aging, I think, is a great adventure, really. In the book, I wanted to show the gritty aspects of it, the difficulties of it. I didn't want to gloss that over, which we do in our culture a lot. And, we have things like anti-aging workshops in our culture, which I think is really funny. But like when it's actually happening, it's quite beautiful. I mean, I had cancer a few years ago and it's limited me in various ways. I'm free of it now, as far as I know, but I mean, it's left me with certain limitations and I'm okay with that. It's like, things fall away. My cognitive skills are definitely diminishing. I can't remember things often. And physically, I go for a walk and they have aches and pains and stuff like that. It's not like being 20 anymore. But it's okay. And what I really saw with my mother was that it was, it's when we think about it from the outside, it looks scary. And I saw this with, people my age who have died too, that I've been with, that from the outside, it looks scary because you see losing one thing after another. But when you're in it, like when I was with my first lover from the 60s who died here in Ashland, and I was with her and she kept saying, it's so interesting how everything is falling away. It's so interesting. She just got really interested. She had been a triathlon competitor. I mean, a very bright woman, and she was losing everything. I mean, she was completely, couldn't swallow, couldn't move, had a catheter, and she just found that interesting. My mother in her final year kept saying over and over, it's so freeing to see that nothing really matters. It's so freeing to see that nothing, and she didn't mean it in some nihilistic, cynical way, because she cared deeply about the world and life. But she really got sort of that it was all okay on some deeper, bigger level, and as I watched her losing one thing after another, I really saw the beauty in it, and even in the grittiness, even in the parts that, like losing bowel control, which, she lost bowel control in a crowded restaurant and she was out to brunch with a bunch of young men from her church. And she lost bowel control and had this huge accident right in the restaurant. I mean, it was pretty, it was kind of horrible, but it was also amazing. Like these young men, they took such beautiful care of her, getting her out of the restaurant, getting her into other clothes, getting her home, calling me. They took such beautiful care of her. And I had the same experience when I had cancer. Just the amount of love I received was really, really life-changing, really life-changing. I think maybe I went on too long with that, but did I?
Oh, no, that's okay. That's okay. Thank you. No, that book is so beautiful. And show the book again, Joan, there.
Okay.
I like the artwork. Who did the artwork for that?
Oh, I did this drawing. It's
you did?
Yeah.
Oh,
And
wow.
and I actually drew it, years ago. Some people think, oh, that's my ostomy. So I had this anal cancer and I have an ostomy now. Some people think that's what the brown swirl is, but this was drawn years ago. It was like I was talking to Julian Noyce, my publisher, about we were sending things back and forth that could be on the cover, skulls and things like that. And and finally I said, I do these funny little drawings, and why don't I send you a few so you can get an idea of what they're like, and then maybe I could do one about death. And so I just sent him this, never thinking it would be the cover, just to give him an idea of these little silly drawings. And he immediately said, that's the cover. So, and then at first I was like, huh? But it kind of grew on me. I really like it.
I love it. I love it. The book has a very cinematic quality to it, especially with the bubbles. That made me sob.
Mm.
The bubbles come. You guys have to read the book. It's beautiful. We have a lot of questions coming in, but I want to ask this question. What is the movie of waking life?
Well, that's just an expression that I use, the movie of waking life, for present experiencing. In other words, there's the dreams we have when we're asleep, and then some people would call waking life a dream, but I sometimes call it the movie of waking life. It's this movie that we're in right now where we seem to be having this meeting together. It's kind of like a movie or a dream in a certain way, by which I don't mean to invalidate it. That's not a way of saying, and therefore it doesn't, have any importance or value or something, but it's like a movie. It's like a dream in a way.
Thank you. That actually leads to this other question by Richard Schneider. Are you any different in deep sleep from dream and waking? Where is identity? Is it all indescribable consciousness, stillness, silence of silence?
Well, yeah, I would say, this gets into what, some people might say is metaphysical, but to me, it's not metaphysical, it's experiential. I have a deep sort of intuition that whatever remains in deep sleep is here now. It is this this vastness, this aliveness, this totality, this awareness, consciousness. I mean, these words like awareness and consciousness get used in different ways by different people. And, consciousness is there when you're awake and not there when you're under anesthesia, except that it is on some level there. And, there's like all these words, and did consciousness, is it produced by the brain, or is the brain an appearance in consciousness? Again, we're on these little binary divides that we get stuck on and start arguing over. To me, my material, mind, and matter are just two different words for the same thing, for this, whatever it is. And, consciousness is a word for this. What you can't, there's something here that we would all, it's our most fundamental experience in a way. Being conscious, being here, being present, and yet what is it? You can't really get hold of it, so I kind of avoid wanting to land on any sort of particular dimension of this vastness as being the most important, or some people do kind of say, well, that awareness that remains in deep sleep, that primordial awareness, that is the most important, the fundamental ground. And I might even agree that it's the fundamental ground, except I don't see it as any different from anything else. But it doesn't feel any more important to me than the immediacy of these words right now, and my lunch, and the tree outside the window, and just the aliveness that's here now. So like some people, especially in advaita, sort of I think, and in various forms of spirituality, there's a kind of prioritizing of the transcendent disembodied spirit, and a kind of the rest of our life as a person is sort of viewed as this complete illusion that's we should just ignore it completely. And I just don't see it that way. I mean, I see people are beautiful to me, and and to me, really, it's about really enjoying this amazing life that we have, enjoying the beauty that is here, even in the simplest things. I mean, you can find beauty, believe me, in emptying an ostomy bag. It doesn't have to be a flower garden. It can be an old cigarette butt crumpled up in the gutter. If you're really seeing it, it's beautiful. And similarly, if you're not really seeing it, if you're lost in thought, you can be at the Grand Canyon or the Swiss Alps and be completely bored. So the beauty really is in the seeing, it's in the awareing, it's in the presence, it's in the aliveness, and so, and this is, as far as I'm concerned, the expression of that ground, if you want to say that. So I don't know if that answered the question, but.
Thank you, Joan. We have a question here from Sajapala. I'm going to read it for you. And we have a few more questions coming up. Question. Oh, wow, this one. Joan, from time to time, you have an outburst of anger, which seems to run contrary to the Joan that we normally see in your writing. Can you say more about this, please? Is it okay, or do you look to change this?
Well, people who follow me on Facebook know that I had a big sort of woo not long ago, and it's interesting because clearly anger is a human emotion. Other animals also have anger, and it seems like it's functional in a certain level, and being honest about it and open about it seems better to me than in the spiritual world, we sometimes get into this sort of thing where people are kind of covering it over with this facade of loving kindness, and they're being kind of passive aggressive, like saying really lovely things, but what they're really saying is fuck you, and it's like, and you can kind of feel it. And so a lot of, to my great surprise, actually, when I had this kind of outburst, a lot of people were really appreciative of it. And because I think it sort of let something loose, and it brought up for me something that had happened when I was in therapy, sobering up from alcoholic drinking in the 70s. My therapist partly did Gestalt therapy, and she had me do these Gestalts. I was trying to quit smoking, and I had to go back and forth between two chairs. And in one chair, I would be the voice of the person who wanted to smoke, and in the other chair, I was the voice of the person who wanted to stop. And so in one chair, I was like, you really need to quit smoking. It's going to give you cancer. It's really expensive. You're wasting a lot of money. And then I would go into the other chair. Oh, come on, lighten up, light up. It's sexy. It's fun. You're going to die anyway. And then I'd go back in the other chair. And I called these two voices the sober nun and the drunken lover. And what I recognized was that they both had an important piece of the truth. The sober nun was the healthy adult, rational aspect of me, which is certainly important. And the drunken lover was this kind of wild, rebellious, childlike, creative spirit. And so the task in sobering up was to find healthier ways for the drunken lover to express herself rather than, getting dead drunk and smashing things up, which I used to do. So about the anger, it kind of struck me that it was, again, a kind of dialogue between these two aspects, the sober nun and the drunken lover. And the sober nun was, you really should just transcend this, and this is not good. You don't want to pour gasoline on the fire. You want to, move towards love and like that aspiration that I read earlier, my deepest aspiration. That's the sober nun, in a way speaking. And then the drunken lover is like, oh, let it rip. Come on. Let's get real. Let it rip, and they both have some validity. What I noticed was that the anger felt painful to me. It felt, and actually, I think a few days ago, I actually deleted one of the posts that had the worst of it in it, just because it was too painful to me to have it still be there. I left some of it, some of the other posts, but because, I know, well, like I said in that thing, I read the aspirations, when I feel the tightening, the bristling, it is a signal that a nerve is being touched, that I am defending an illusion and fighting for my limitations. It's like in some way when we're triggered by somebody, there, what is it that's getting defensive? What is it in me that I'm defending or protecting? What is it that feels insulted or threatened here? And that's just a really interesting question to look into and inquire into meditatively, meaning with awareness rather than by thinking about it. But even if it seems like, I might be angry because somebody is doing something that I see as genuinely hurtful to people, but what is it in me that feels, threatened by that, in the deep way that I maybe do sometimes? So to me, that's the interesting inquiry. And I don't feel good about just saying horrible, hurtful things to people and dumping anger and pouring gasoline. And I think, right now, in the polarizations that exist in our society right now, to express the kind of anger that you might feel for the other side is not helpful. It just pours gasoline on the fire. And so, I do see that as something to, I don't want to get the right word here, because it's so important that it's, I don't want to push it. I don't want to like just say, oh, transcend it. It's no good. It's wrong, because that doesn't feel right. It's, but maybe have I said this clearly?
Yeah. Maybe acknowledging. I don't know.
Acknowledging. Yeah, I mean,
rather than transcending. I don't know.
Yeah, I also there's a story that I did put on my Facebook page about an incident that happened to me in San Francisco years ago. I was driving, and I came to a stoplight, and this cab pulls up next to me, and he rolls down his window and starts just berating me for some mistake I'd made in my driving, which I didn't think I'd made. And, saying like, it's idiots like you that make the roads unsafe, and calling me awful names and everything. I started yelling back at him and calling him obscenities and telling him it was him that was making the road unsafe. And, back and forth, we went just yelling at each other. And then the light turned green, and he flashed me this gorgeous, amazing smile and said, have a great day. And I smiled back and said the same thing to him. And it was like, it was just gone. And it was like, that's an example of how anger could actually be something beautiful. Like, we had this little explosion of energy, and then we both ended up with just love in the end, but it doesn't often go that way. I mean, often when we are angry and we express it, we say things that that are hurtful and that maybe don't dissolve as easily, because the reality is we're human beings, and we're not perfect, and we have we have, we do get hurt, and often we hold on to things for years sometimes. So
Thank-
yeah, and I noticed that there's people who are raising their hands, like, also.
There's
I
one
can't
that's
hear
raised
you.
their hand, but there's still a couple of questions here that came before the raising of the hand. So I'll
Oh,
get to you,
okay.
Susan.
Okay, you're doing things in
Uh,
order.
yeah, no worries. Yeah, there's a lot of questions here. There's just there's a comment here. Beautiful story about your mom. So lovely. That's from Richard. And Satish asked, what practice can this non-existent me to abide in unicity and convince that the me doesn't exist?
Well, I would just say that right now, let's see if we can find this me right now. I mean, what is it right now? We have sort of a mental image of me. Again, we're not saying there's no functional sense. There's a functional sense of location here in this body that's essential for functioning. I can distinguish between my hand and the carrot I'm cutting up, that kind of thing. But the me that we sort of think is in there, like the me that is the thinker, that's thinking my thoughts and making my choices, and that me, the me that gets defensive because I feel like someone has insulted me, or threatened my territory or something like that. Can we find that me? Can we actually find it? If we look for it, where are these, like, if even as I'm speaking, if I look for where are these words coming from, I can't find any author back there. you know they're just coming out. And even if I had prepared this as a speech, where would that have come from when I was preparing it? It's all just there. You can't really find this me. And so, as for a practice, I mean, there's a lot of things one can do. And I would say whatever, you're drawn to, but um, I think meditation is helpful. And by meditation, I mean just taking time to be present, silently present, and just see what's here. Just without trying to do anything. You don't have to try to still the mind or control the mind. I mean, there are meditations where that is what you try to do, and that's fine too. But it's possible just to be here and just notice how you'll start to notice how the mind works, how thoughts pop up, even whether you want them to or not, they pop up. And sometimes you'll find that you get, consciousness gets absorbed in them, and you kind of wake up suddenly and realize that you've just spent the last 15 minutes or something in this train of thought about something. And so meditation of that kind, especially because we live in such a information ridden verbal culture, I think it's a really beautiful thing to take time to be in silence and just and you can do it while you're walking too, just walking in instead of being on your phone while you're walking or something, just walk and just appreciate everything, this crumpled cigarette butts in the gutter or the beautiful trees or whatever you're walking through. Just and then that kind of exploration that we were doing earlier, just really looking to see if you can find a place where inside turns into outside, or what, if I don't refer to thought and memory, what am I right now? And just feel into those questions, explore them. um, so I don't know. um, I don't recommend any particular practice, but whatever practice people are drawn to, I great. And I don't even particularly like the word practice. I more resonate with explorations, and practice sounds too formal to me or something. Although, I take time every morning to sit on my little meditation cushion, and sometimes during the day, I just sit in my armchair, just sitting in my armchair, just being. And And I think it's a great way to explore and see if you can find the me. It's wonderful. Like one wonderful way is to, if you're making a decision, like for example, whether to go on a trip, just watch how that decision happens. Watch the back and forth thoughts and how the decisive moment comes up suddenly. Just watch the whole process and see if you can find a chooser in there, or even something simple like getting up after you've been sitting down for a while. How does that happen? Just watch. So exploring all that, I think, is a great way to. I may have cognitively lost the question, but it had something to do with a practice to find the me, or find out how there wasn't a me or something, right?
Yeah, what what practice can be this non-existent me
Yeah.
to abide in unicity and convince that the me doesn't exist?
Oh, yeah. Well, you don't have to really practice to abide in unicity. I mean, it's more like just noticing that you already are unicity. I mean, you are abiding in unicity. You can't leave it. You can't, try not to be here. Try to get out of the now. Try to get out of here, this immediacy. You can't, try to leave the universe. You can't. It's like you are an expression and manifestation of this wholeness. You can't not be it. You can't avoid it, actually. So if you think you have to find it, immediately that's a signal that you've sort of turned unicity into some kind of thing, some like experience, some particular experience that you want to get. And of course, we have different experiences. Like, for example, you can have experiences where you just feel this wonderful, open, spacious presence, and there's no thoughts. And then you can think, well, that's it. That's unicity. And then, of course, you lose it because no experience like that is going to stick around. And so then you get caught up in trying to get that back. And that's just kind of a losing endeavor. It's the getting it, losing it syndrome. And, but just to notice that all of that happens here now. The getting it, the losing it, it all happens here now as part of this whole happening. It all happens here. So it's like you already are unicity. You don't have to work at it.
Thank you, Joan. Um, I have a long question here, and then I'm going to go to Susan, and then I'm going to go to, there's so many questions now. I'm going to read one. So I wonder, are we meant to be abiding in this broad place of pure awareness? And is it even beneficial to take refuge in the now, or to be knowingly the presence of awareness? Because awareness willingly chooses to express itself as the person. And if we try to avoid this awareness and escaping our suffering, we are somewhat missing the fullness of our humanity. And I feel a lot of my spiritual practice or realizations have led to this shedding all the layers of the personal self. But now I question whether that is the point. Doesn't awareness
I get it. I
you
get
got
it.
it? Okay.
Yeah. I would say, I personally don't find these pointers to abide in awareness useful, because what I think it does is sort of reify awareness into something or some particular state, and then the me, gets caught up in trying to abide in awareness and not get lost in being the person. And in fact, we always are abiding in awareness. We are awareness, and you can't get out of it. And any moment you stop, check, here you are, but awareness is, as you say, expressing as all of this. It's like the ocean is expressing as the waves. So, so the point isn't to, I think it was Thich Nhat Hanh said, you don't need to stop being a wave to be the ocean. you don't need to stop being a wave to be the ocean. It's fine to be a person. And I feel like life has different dimensions. This aliveness has different dimensions. It has, or different experiences. And it's like we can see this present happening as as just shapes and colors and sensations and sounds, or we can see it, as a meaningful, event with a story. For example, in the book, I think I have the example, the starving child in a famine on one level is very real, and the hunger pains really hurt, and the mother's grief is very real. On another level, you can see it all as kind of a passing dream, or just shapes and colors. And those are kind of different perspectives or dimensions. And I would say fixating on any of them is where we go awry. And awry? Amiss. Awry. Anyway. Going awry.
Awry.
Going awry. Yes. A good description of life. Going awry.
That's a good one. That's
Yeah.
a good one. Susan, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Susan Hill. Yeah.
Yes. Hi. So the expression love and wisdom, they're like the two wings of a bird to fly, or a bird who needs two wings to fly, right? And then they often mention love and wisdom. And so to me, wisdom is like the presence we talk about, the one we ultimately are, all of us, that one presence. And then the love is the humanness, because we are appearing as humans. And humans are naturally loving, right? They have empathy. And we are creators. And so it's like the love of what we are made of. And we can create beautiful things in the world and take care of Earth, and also the opposite. But so when you talk, I really feel that love from you, and you are really, it's like you're following your heart. And a lot of religions point to the heart, right? So there's a lot about that love, that openness, that embracing everything, the anger, the love, all the spectrum of feelings. And so it's when you go to words, like you also talk about the opposites, and we no choice. And every time we do that, it's like, then we are actually going away from that love, because love is beyond words, right? Love is that where you're acting in life from your heart, moment by moment, throughout life, if you follow that heart, because it knows before the words, before the concepts. Can you speak about that?
Yeah, well, I don't want to, I'm a writer and I love words. And I also think that words can be, can express love and can point to openness. And words are an amazing, just the fact that this is happening, this languaging that's happening right now. If you really look at it, it's what an amazing mystery it is. It's just these sounds like blah, 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 blah. And yet somehow it translates into meaning. And so, I don't want to pathologize words, or thinking for that matter. Thinking is a wonderful aspect of this whole happening. But where I think that, the problem comes when we kind of mistake our thoughts for the reality itself. In other words, we mistake the map for the territory. And it seems really obvious that the word water is not water, but it gets so much more subtle. And we really all the time do mistake our conceptual maps for the territory, without even realizing that we're doing it, because we are so embedded in language and words. So that's, I think, where it's helpful to do something like meditation, or just, you don't even have to call it meditation, but just take time to be, or timeless time to be silent, to be present, to be still, to be wordless. And things reveal themselves in that they're beautiful. And
yeah, so it's maybe also a way to let the master is your heart, and your mind is supposed to be the servant of the heart, kind of, right?
Mm.
It's like we get it the other way around a lot. Like, no, it's my thoughts and it's my words and my beliefs that are running the show, and then my heart will kind of follow along. But it's probably more opposite. I mean, again, it's worse, but
yeah. I mean, to me, the deeper truth is in the living actuality, in presence, or you could call it the heart, or just the living actuality of, you know, this moment, just this moment, the just thisness of including, you know, the shapes and colors and everything. And when we get into the thinking realm, you know, we're sort of in this abstract realm, which is fine. It's beautiful, and it has all sorts of functions, and can be very creative. But you know, and there's a lot of suffering also in believing certain thoughts. You know, like believing that I'm not enlightened yet, I'm a failure, I'll never get it, or believing that, you know, you ruined my life. If you hadn't done that, I would be a happy person, and you know, those kinds of thoughts. Are suffering, are a form of suffering, and when we believe them. So yeah, and I think we're so, our society is so verbally oriented that, you know, just in being with someone, it's helpful just to be able to be silent, to listen sometimes. Yeah, so thank you. Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
I can't hear you, Emerson.
We have Andrea. Andrea, go ahead and unmute yourself if you have a question. And I have a few more questions that are written here, but go ahead, Andrea.
Oh. Hi, Joan.
Hi.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I just following on, I have two things, but following on from what you were just saying, I have a favorite quote from Wei Wu Wei. The intellect only feeds on dead meat. The act of cognition slays the living perception. But my question is something you were talking about earlier about running away from death. And you made a distinction between instinctual fear of death versus psychological. And I was wondering if you could say more about that.
Okay, I love that quote from Wei Wu Wei. I hadn't heard it before, but that's great. Yeah, that's a good description. Like, you know, I often say that thought is like the picture in the anatomy book, and life itself is like what the surgeon encounters when they actually cut into a living body and everything is moving. And, you know, that's the difference, isn't it? Life itself is just alive and moving. And then the conceptual world is sort of frozen and dead. So that's a great quote. Okay, death and psychological versus, well, biological, maybe fear of death, you know, that there's a fear of death that's part of our survival system. You know, it's like really a good thing to feel fear if a tiger is running towards you, or a bus is hurling towards you or something. You know, it shoots adrenaline through your body and gives you, you know, what you need to get out of the way or to deal with the situation. So that's a biological, instinctual kind of fear that's helpful and useful. But the psychological fear of death is, you know, thinking again, it's in the world of thinking always. And you know, the instinctual fear of death is a happening in the moment. You know, it's very visceral, it's alive, it's moving. Whereas the psychological fear of death is in that realm of thought. Again, it's a dead meat kind of thing. You know, it's a frozen thing. It's the anatomy book rather than the living body. And so it's like, you know, these thoughts like, oh my God, you know, what's going to happen to me after I die? Or, you know, what if there's an earthquake and I die? Or, you know, sort of, well, I'm not ready to die now. I haven't finished everything I needed to do, or whatever, you know, just these kind of, they're more in the thought realm. They're in the thought realm completely, you know, and There's a great quote I love from Mark Twain. I often say it, but it's like, he said, I've been through some terrible things in my life and some of them actually happened. And it's sort of like, you know, we die many times, I think, in our imagination, in our thoughts, you know, imagining, oh, the earthquake, the wildfire, the, you know, the whatever, you know. Did that get to it, or is there more to the question?
Yes.
Okay.
No, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Joan. I have a question here. When you are really seeing, are there any differences? Who is the seer? Is it only existence, peace, joy?
Well, right now we could notice that there really is no seer apart from the seeing. There's just seeing, really. You know, it's a verb, really, not a noun. There's just seeing or awareing. There's just seeing, and the thing seen and the seer are these kind of, you know, that's the map again, the map of the territory, the thought map, which divides this experience up into the seer, the seeing, and the seen. But the divisions aren't really there in direct experience right now. There's just seeing, you know, and you can't, right now, there's no real boundary. Like, if there's no boundary between the things seen and the awareness seeing them, you can't find a boundary really between where awareness ends and the wall begins. Or, you know, whatever you're looking at, the computer screen or whatever, you know, there isn't really a boundary there. And so, what was the question again? See, this is what happens when you get old.
Now I lost it. Just a second. When you are really seeing, are there any differences?
Any differences?
Is it only existence, peace, joy?
Okay. Well, are there any differences? Well, again, it's sort of that paradox where, on the one hand, you could say, well, obviously there's differences. I mean, look, there's all these different people, and there's all these different colors and shapes, and there's, you know, different experiences and different sensations. And when you're really seeing, you see, in fact, when you're really seeing, if we're just talking about visual seeing, even when you're really seeing, you see ever more subtle variations and distinctions and differences. And, you know, so yes, there are differences. But then you could also notice that everything that appears is this same kind of presence. It's this presentness. It's this, you know, it's like the wave. You know, there are different waves, and you can see that there's a lot of differences in the different waves, and yet all of them are equally ocean or equally water. So it's like at the same moment, right here, right now, there's multiplicity, and there's wholeness or totality or unicity. But there was some part of that about beauty and truth or something that now I have lost.
Is it only existence, peace, joy?
When you're really seeing, is it just peace, joy? Was that sort of the question?
Yeah, I think that's what it's alluding.
I don't know. I'm reluctant to say things like that because, you know, you might be really feeling deeply into something. You might be feeling incredible physical pain, or you might be experiencing deep grief. Your partner of 50 years just died or whatever, you know. So I wouldn't want to say that that it's always going to be joy or peace. I mean, because even, you know, yeah, we can get into words here. Like, is there, you know, I don't know, but I'm reluctant to characterize things as sort of, you know, always joyful or something like that.
Thank you. This one I skipped, but I didn't see this one. How to see and appreciate the beauty in everything. How is it beautiful?
Well,
I mean,
you know, I would recommend just seeing, just being with, you know, just actually. When I was in high school, I had took a class in filmmaking, and the teacher had us do this thing the first day of the first class. He had us look at our thumbs, and we, you know, and like 10 minutes went by, we're looking at our thumbs, and and he said, how many of you are bored? And a lot of people raised their hand, and then he said, well, if you were really seeing, you wouldn't be bored. And he would give us these homework assignments, like, you know, to spend an hour looking at a tiny portion of bark on a tree, or like laying on the living room floor and watching the shadows dance on the ceiling, or watching the light move on a wall, or something like that, you know. And when you're really seeing things, and you can experiment with this, I mean, just take any, like, here's a piece of Kleenex, and you could say, it's just a piece of Kleenex. What could be beautiful about that? But if you really start looking at it, it's quite amazing, actually, and quite beautiful. And, you know, we often don't see things because we're fixated on the label, you know, and like we have a label like, oh, that's just a Kleenex, not important. Or that's a crumpled cigarette package in the gutter, shouldn't be there, litter. Or you know, rain, I was hoping for a sunny day, yuck. Or you know, whatever. And the label and the evaluation prevents us from really looking, really appreciating. But if you really listen to the rain and smell the rain and watch the rain and see how it's glistening on the leaves and everything, it becomes this miraculous experience. And if you really look at that crumpled cigarette package, or that Kleenex, or the poop in your ostomy bag, I mean, it can be something of, there again, the thought would say repulsive, ugh, you know, but if you really see it, it's not repulsive. It's you know, after I had this surgery for the cancer, my intestine comes out my belly now and empties into a bag. And the intestine that comes out of the belly is called the stoma. And, you know, it's pink, and it's about that big around, and it's pink, and it undulates, and poop comes out of it. And in the hospital, when I first looked at it, it was like, oh God, you know, it was a difficult first meeting, but as I really now I have a name for it. I call him Otto. And you know, the more I've enjoyed looking at Otto, I actually find him quite beautiful and interesting, the way he does these amazing movements, and poop comes out in these amazingly different formations. And you know, sometimes I just pull my pants out and just watch Otto. It's like, you know, it's fascinating. And you know, so we don't see things because we have the idea that they're unimportant, or they're ugly, or they're repulsive, or they shouldn't be there, or whatever it is, you know. But when we really look at them, we can find beauty in anything, you know. And similarly with sounds, you know, I rarely listen to music. I like to just listen to the sounds that are here, you know, the car passing in the street, and the refrigerator doing its little noise, and the bird that sings occasionally, and the neighbor's dog barking. And it's like a symphony. It's beautiful. I mean, John Cage made a whole, you know, he had a whole symphony, the composer, John Cage, where, you know, the audience is sitting there, and then there's nothing. That's the symphony, just everything that's happening in the audience, just sitting there, you know, people coughing and opening their cough drop packages and all that. That's the symphony, and the crackling sound. And so, yeah, when we're really hearing, when we're really seeing, or sensing, this is true of physical pain, when you really go into it as sensation, physical pain, it no longer feels overwhelming. It becomes interesting. Even might still be painful, but it can be really interesting and different, you know. But if you're sort of separating yourself from it, and, oh no, pain, it's going to kill me, I hate it, when will it go away, it gets worse and it feels overwhelming. So it's so, just to really explore what's here, just take time. We don't do that very much, and now we have these phones and like I was in, the last time I was in Berkeley, I was driving around and, I drove through the campus and everyone on campus, they were all walking around. They're in this beautiful place with these incredible trees. I mean, it's amazing where they are. And they're all walking around like staring at their phone, It's like, wake up, people, wake up, and so, just to do that, just put the phone down, and just open your eyes, open your ears, feel into the body, just, enjoy. I mean, taste your food, enjoy. Don't be reading, well, not don't. I mean, you can read and eat at the same time. That's fine. But as an experiment, you might just eat and really taste the food, and yeah, don't make any of it into a should, but yeah, just to really delight and enjoy what's here, because it's beautiful, really. It's beautiful. I mean, this is an amazing gift, this life. And it goes by really quickly, I'll tell you.
Thank you, Joan. There's a question here from Ron. Where does purpose arise in the non-dual here now?
Purpose. Well, again, it's one of these paradox things, two-sided paradox things, because on the one hand, this whole happening is purposeless. And there's something very freeing and wonderful about realizing how purposeless it is. Because in our culture, we get very fixated on purpose. I have to have a purpose. What is my purpose? I don't have a purpose. Oh my God. And what is the purpose of life? What is the purpose of anything? We can get all tangled up in that. And it's very freeing to realize that we don't need a purpose, that there's just this, and we don't need a purpose or an explanation or a meaning. And then on the other hand, as human beings, we do sometimes have a purpose. We want to, when I got cancer, for example, I asked the doctor, I said, what happens if I don't do anything? Because I was thinking maybe I should take my exit door. And he said, well, you'll be dead in a couple of weeks. It's not a great way to die. And I was in the middle of writing this book, and I literally, the thought came up, I can't die now. I have to finish this book. and it decides I wasn't, it was like, no, I'm not ready to go in 2 weeks. But it was like, that's a purpose, I guess, so I don't think it's not, it's not about landing on this sort of purposeless side either and saying, oh, there's no purpose, you shouldn't have a purpose. Everything is meaningless. But we don't really need a meaning either. I mean, we're just here, like right now, if we're just here, what does it mean? Or what's the purpose? I mean, to say that it's meaningless is another idea, but to say that it's meaningful is also an idea. It just is, it just is, really. And I don't know if that helped. But
that was brilliantly put there, Joan.
Brilliantly put.
Brilliant put.
I like to hear. Brilliantly put.
Brilliantly put.
You answered that brilliantly.
Brilliant. There's a question. It's a longish question, so I'm going to read it. Okay, it's really long.
If it's really long, maybe you can summarize it or something.
I'll summarize it. This is from Kristen. I wonder, are we meant to be abiding in this broad place of pure awareness, and is it even beneficial to take refuge in the now? So I'll go to the point. Wait,
didn't we already do that one?
I think so, but there's a question here. The question is, so I feel a lot of my spiritual practice realizations have led to this shedding all the layers of the personal self, but now I question whether that is the point. Doesn't awareness want this experience in order to express itself uniquely? It feels like a detached way to live, an impersonal way to live, as always abiding as awareness.
Yeah, we already answered that question.
Okay, sorry. Yes, we did actually. What?
See, your cognitive is slipping too.
I know I'm getting there. It's that book, the death book.
Yeah, it's that reading that book and
That's what.
the
Damn
mind
it.
goes.
Damn it, Joan. So this question is long. So if we're watching a movie being projected on a screen, there's a sense in which there are things within the characters or story in movie which can be improved. At the same time, the screen itself is perfect and functioning perfectly as a movie screen. Does this work as a metaphor for how things can be perfect, but there be also room for improvement? If not, can you suggest a metaphor?
Well, I guess I would say that there's perfection in the imperfection. Like, was my outburst of anger on Facebook recently, was that perfect or imperfect? We can't really say. Or my having cancer, was that perfect or imperfect? Or the fact that I was born without a right hand because it was amputated while I was in the uterus. Was that perfect or imperfect? Is having one arm perfect or imperfect? Is this perfect or imperfect? So I think there's a lot, like the crumpled cigarette butt in the gutter. Is that perfect or imperfect? I think there's a lot of perfection in the imperfection. So the movie screen, I mean, it's a useful analogy, and the movie screen in the movie, but it can sort of, we need to get past it because it can sort of lead to, again, reifying things and sort of having the idea that there's a movie screen, pure awareness over here. And then over here is the movie with all the garbage and the junk and the problems, and really it's one whole happening. You can't, again, find a boundary between the screen and the movie, really. And I would be cautious about saying the perfection is in awareness and the imperfection is in what shows up. That just doesn't feel right to me somehow. But curiously, yes, wait a minute. But curiously, in a way, when you find the beauty in the things that are supposedly problematic or ugly, in a way, it is that awareing presence that is the beauty. Like we were saying earlier, when you're really seeing the cigarette package crumpled in the gutter is beautiful. When you're not really seeing, you can be at that Swiss Alps and be bored because you're lost in thought about your, the person who just jilted you or something, So yeah, maybe that.
Thank
I'm
you.
done.
This one, I read all your books and just love your writing, is from Yasmin. What annoys you most about the Advaita world? And you go back, what annoys you most about the Advaita world? And do you go back and forth between one that cannot find a boundary between inner and outer, and the real seeming Joan that knows where she ends and the chair begins?
No, I don't feel like I go back and forth. I feel like I can find both of those right here, right now. And there's no, if it would take thought to come up with me going back and forth in time between one and the other. But what annoys me most about Advaita?
The Advaita world.
The Advaita world. Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't really want to, I love certain aspects of Advaita. Advaita has been very helpful to me in many ways, as has Zen, as has, the one Tibetan Buddhist teacher I was with. I mean, radical non-dualists like Tony Parsons have been helpful to me. A lot of different things have been helpful to me. And I guess if I had to say, I think the biggest drawback in Advaita that I see is that people sort of reify awareness and sort of get caught in this duality of, trying to identify as awareness and discounting discounting the world. Now, not all Advaita people do that. I mean, so it's not, it'd be an overgeneralization to say that. And I don't really want to get into, you know, picking apart what's wrong with this way and that way, but yeah. And there's a raised hand. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yes, I do. It's actually next. RP, go ahead and unmute yourself. There's maybe 5 more questions or 7 questions. But
And
go ahead, RP.
We're
Okay,
getting,
yeah.
we've got like 20 minutes left, I think, or so.
Yeah,
So
we have 20 minutes left.
people, and we have a bunch of questions, so people try to, you know, keep them concise.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi.
Good. Okay, my name's Russ. I'm adverse to putting full names on since my credit card got hacked over a year ago, and people from places far away were stealing clothes and stuff using my credit card. So, anyway, I've been banding around trying to work on a book, and I also was running a meditation group for a while, and that stopped, and I was thinking about starting one again. But this term mind really bothers me. We all use it all the time. We use it in different ways, like I got something on my mind, or I don't mind, or this or that. Zen talks about mind or big mind or little mind. And I'm there like, how can we really get anywhere in discussing things when we don't know what we're talking about? Really, I mean, mind is, I kind of like what Tony said, the example she used about the weather, where weather really isn't a thing, right? It's an agglomeration of a bunch of different things that we track, temperature, wind speed, and all that. You ask somebody what the weather is, and they realize that that's all that. So I'm just wondering what you think about that term. Maybe you've never thought about it before, because we all use it so loosely and we take it for granted that we all know what it is. But when you really look at it, what is it?
Well, and
what do you think about that problem?
Yeah. Well, I think that's true of absolutely everything. When you really look at anything,
Right.
whether it's Joan or Russ or the cabinet behind you, or the cigarette package or the Kleenex, or an emotion like fear or anger or anything that we can label, when you really look at it, you can't get hold of what it is. When you really look at it, it's moving
Right.
and changing, and it's inseparable from everything else, and you can't really pin it down. You can't really get hold of anything. And then we have these, you know, certain words are like table and chair. They're very concrete, and it's pretty clear what we mean when we're pointing to the table, you know, or the chair. Even though,
upon that.
even though, you know, when we really look deeply, we don't find any substance there either. But you know, it's,
Right.
it's on a relative everyday level. The chair and the table are, you know, pretty obvious and concrete. But when we get into talking about things like consciousness, awareness, mind, spirit, soul, you know, any of those kinds of terms, then we're really talking about something that's not concrete at all, in the way that the table and the chair appear to be, and we all of those words that I just named get used in a variety of different ways at different
Right.
by different people, and sometimes different ways by the same person, from one, you know, page to the next in a book or something. So, you know, I think, and of course, there's that old Zen thing about, you know, the student comes to the Zen master and says, you know, help me pacify my mind. And the Zen master says, show me your mind. And the student says, well, I can't find it. And the Zen master says, there, I've pacified it.
Yep.
So, you know, it's like, I think the main thing is to just be aware of the fact that all these words can be very slippery, and it's helpful to find out how a particular person is using them, because then
Right.
we don't get into a misunderstanding where one person is using mind to mean, you know, totality or something, and someone else is using it to mean thinking, and we're having an argument over it because we're using it in two different ways or something. So it's helpful to find out where people are coming from when they use it. But Yeah, I had an exchange with Tony Packer once. I think I put it in one of my books actually, but you know, I was saying something like just exactly this, that consciousness, awareness, all these words, what are we even talking about? Nobody knows what we're talking about. And she said, yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. She said, it's like the ether in the old science. You know,
Yep.
it's like we're
Yep.
talking about, and yet at the same time, these words, you know, like these words can point to something that's meaningful when we know what we're talking about, you know, or we think we do, you know, like even soul, which is a word that I don't relate to very much, but some
Right.
people use it, you know, to sort of differentiate between soul, which is down to earth, and spirit, which is more transcendent. And then I can kind of grok what they're pointing to, you know, and so, yeah, I don't know. I hope that kind of responded.
Yep. That's cool.
Thank you, Russ.
Thank you, Russ. Thank you, Russ. There's a couple of questions here. This one is from Elena. What is your opinion about malefic energy? People who are possessed, what is this energy of manipulation?
Malefic energy?
Yeah, malefic.
That's a word I've never heard, malefic.
Me too. I know Maleficent, you know, from
What does that mean, Maleficent?
you know, the one from the Disney character, you know, like the Snow White one.
I don't know the Snow White. Anyway, well, some people are possessed or something. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't.
Evil. Someone just messaged me and said, what is your opinion about evil energy? People who are possessed, what is this energy of manipulation?
Okay. Well, I don't think of in terms of evil. I don't really like the word evil very much. And I don't think in terms of evil people or people who are possessed, because it seems to me that we are all possessed a lot of the time by our thoughts and beliefs. And we can all be evil, if you want to use that word. I wouldn't use that word, but we can all do things that are harmful and hurtful and unkind. And what was it? Manipulative? Was that it? Was that the word? Manipulative?
Yes.
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 Yeah.
That's
Like,
right.
I mean, one of the things when I was I lived for 5 years at a meditation retreat center run by Tony Packer, my main teacher, who Russ and I were mentioning, and you know, we did 10 silent retreats a year, and Tony was always inviting us to see, you know, the machinations of the what you might call the ego, another word that doesn't mean anything, and so there was a lot of, you know, seeing that. And I mean, I remember just my shock at discovering that how manipulative I was, and how noticing myself doing all these really sleazy manipulative things, like coming into the kitchen and, you know, smiling at people so that they would smile at me. And, you know, and like, if I thought someone didn't like me, like deliberately starting a conversation and trying to make sure that they liked me. And, you know, just I saw myself doing these things, and it was like, oh no. And, you know, and then I saw myself, you know, like pitying myself. And I've always hated pity. You know, it was like, and I was like, oh my God, this is self-pity. And of course, you know, we don't need to add the layer of, oh my God, this is terrible, what an awful person I am, because the truth is we all have this stuff. We all have it in different amounts, different balances, more of this, less of that, but we all have this human stuff. And you know, some people, you know, why do some people go to such, quote, monstrous levels, you know, someone like Hitler or Jack the Ripper, or, you know, why do some people, you know, who knows? I mean, as far as psychopaths, I mean, there's a lot of research indicating that their brain may lack the capacity for empathy. So it may actually be, you know, there may be a genetic or biological root for some of that kind of behavior. How does someone become as extreme as Hitler or somebody like that? You know, who knows? But you know, I can find Hitler in myself, not at that extreme level, but you know, anytime I have an idea of, you know, which group of people it would be good to get rid of, And in my case, it's not the Jewish people, but I have my little group that, that might be nice if these people went. And, I'm not taking it to the level of, let's build camps or anything, but so I have my own little inner Hitler, and I have my own little, inner Ramana Maharshi too. We all have the whole thing in there, and how some of it gets very extreme in some people, either what we would call good or evil, I have no idea. I mean, who knows?
I love you,
But
Joan.
I think the important thing is to find it in oneself, not to find it out there in somebody else, because it's really easy. We love to have someone to blame and someone to hate. And I have indulged in this myself many times. So I'm not, but it makes us, we feel righteous and good, and these other people are, really bad. And and when we really understand, if we could really understand, if we had the same genetics, the same conditioning, the same childhood, if we had all the same things as Adolf Hitler, then we would be Hitler. We would, I mean, that's what we are, is a combination of all these many threads and forces, so to have compassion for people, even when they're doing things that we find abhorrent, to know that there, but for the grace of God, go I, and to see the roots of all of that in ourselves is what I think is most helpful.
Thank you, Joan. This one is from Richard. Who dies? Was the one who ever died ever real? Just to let everybody know that we have 10 minutes left. The questions are shorter, so that's great.
Okay.
I'll repeat the question. Who dies? Was the one who died ever real?
Well, again, it's one of those false dualities. There's an old Zen koan where they go to, the student and the master go to a funeral service together, and the student bangs on the coffin and says, dead or alive, and the master says, I won't say. And it's like, on the one hand, there's nothing here to die, because everything that's here that you call Joan is constantly changing and morphing into something else and inseparable from everything else. So what dies, and at the same time, if someone you love dies, they are gone, and it's a very final kind of departure. Like, they don't come back. I mean, you may sense them, you may, like I have a feeling of my mother, for example, in my heart, but it's not like she's in the room and I can talk to her and hug her and all that, so in that sense, you can't deny the fact that something very precious and real is gone with finality. And then at the same time, if you try to find what it is that's gone, you can't really get hold of it. You can't quite pin it down or find it, because where do we begin? Where do we end? You can't really say. So it's both. You can't land on either side.
Beautifully put there, Joan. And this one is from Richard. Joan, you are the joy that describes phenomena. The essence of phenomena is joy, and you point out the joy in poop. So beautiful, so joyful.
The joy in poop. That could be.
You're the most radical now. This one is from Rose. Aren't the people looking at their iPhones, wholeness? Aren't they already unconditional love?
Well, again, we have one of these, paradox, two-sided things where on the one hand, everything is included in totality or in unicity, including Adolf Hitler, including the Holocaust, including, people looking at their phones, not to equate them, but, including, our distracted thinking, including everything is included in totality. air pollution, climate change, whatever you can think of. It's all what is. It's all part of this inseparable whole. And at the same time, we have this capacity as human beings, which is part of the universe. We are the universe having this capacity, you could say, of discernment, where we can notice, wait a minute, when I'm lost in thoughts about, how you've ruined my life, I'm suffering. And oh, maybe if I meditate or do the work of Byron Katie or whatever, one of the 10 million things I do, it might help. I might, or whatever. So again, we can't land on either side. It's like, I certainly wasn't trying to say that looking at your phone is bad or that people shouldn't look at their phones. But I do feel like this is an addiction. And as someone who has, a lifetime of experience with addiction, the thing you notice about addiction eventually, if not immediately, is that it's a form of suffering. It yields a sort of temporary pleasure that's very alluring, but it's a form of suffering.
Thank you, Joan. I have a comment here from Marianne. Marianne goes, I'm having a great time wrapping Christmas presents and listening to you in my sitting room. It is lovely to see you and hear your voice. Now I'm going to do my yoga class. Just this. Love, Marianne. This one is from Lee. I'm just wondering if Joan can think of a metaphor for how things can be perfect and there also be a room for improvement.
Well, here, or you. We are the living metaphor for how things are perfect and how they can be improved. It's, everything is perfect exactly the way it is, mistakes, defects, and all. And if we have a flat tire, we're not going to just stand there and say it's perfect just as it is. No, we're going to fix the tire. It's part of how the universe moves through us. So, yeah.
Thank you. There's one from Barbara. What if you fix in yourself something that is very hard to accept?
Well, I think we all have things within us that are very hard to accept. Like I was mentioning, when I first started discovering these myself doing things like manipulating and stuff, that wasn't my self-image. That wasn't how I thought I was. And, when I was a drunk years ago, I was an abusive person. I mean, my first lover, before she died, she told me that she had had nightmares about me throughout her life, and that I had hit her in the back with a chair once, which I have no memory of doing, but I don't imagine she made it up. And I know I punched people and kicked people, and I destroyed a whole house once, smashed out every window, threw the TV through a window. I mean, I was violent and abusive. And, when I think of some of the things I did, it's painful. But I corresponded for a while with a man who was a serial child rapist. Some people have, that's even darker than anything I did, some people have to live with, and everybody I know who's a parent has things that they regret. I remember my mother, close to dying, she said to me, she'd been worried all her life because she apparently, when we got home, I was in the hospital when I was about 3 for otitis, which is an ear thing. And when we got home, I said, I have an earache. And she said she shook me. She got really angry and she shook me and she said, no, you don't. Because she was so frustrated with, going through all this medical stuff. And she wanted it to be over. And I don't even remember this, but, she had carried it around through her whole life as this, terrible mistake, this thing that she had done to her child, and like everybody I know who's a parent, I'm not a parent, but everyone I know who is, has things that, they did that they regret, that, Tony Packer used to talk about how, she vowed that when she had a child, she wouldn't do these different things that had been done to her as a child. And then she found herself doing them all. It's sort of like we all have to live with this stuff. And I think what's helpful is to see that it is just our human stuff. And whatever we're doing, whether it's something very mild or whether it's child rape, serial child rape or something, we are doing that because of some combination of whatever, nature and nurture, genetics, neurochemistry, life experiences, conditioning, whatever has driven us to the behaviors that we engage in that moment, the capacity to do something different just isn't there. I mean, no one would choose to be a serial child rapist. You're going to be hated by everybody. I mean, you're going to go to prison. This is not something you would choose. And yet it may choose you, it's like, the best thing is just to notice the tendency to judge ourselves, because we're very hard on ourselves. I think it's epidemic in our society that we're so hard on ourselves and so judgmental of ourselves, and just to see that we all make mistakes. It's just part of being alive, part of being human. And sometimes we do terrible things. But once they're done, you can't undo them. All you can do is go forward, and, all you can deal with is right now. And it doesn't help to go over in your head all the terrible things you did in the past. Then you just feel bad. It doesn't help the people you did it to, and it doesn't help you. It just creates more suffering now. So just to see those patterns of thinking where we're, judging and condemning ourselves, and come back to just right here, right now, where, where's the past right now? It's just gone. There's just this, just this. That's the title of my talk, just this. And I managed to end on it.
What a beautiful ending. Wow. How did you do that?
It's a very deep skill.
That's right. That's right.
Very deep skill. Yes.
That's
you
right.
have to be very, very, very enlightened to do that.
That was a very enlightened thing to do. Very enlightened. That's like upper echelon enlightenment there.
Yeah. I don't like to point that out, but
that's right. That's right. Yeah. Before we go, I just have a couple of announcements. And next week, we have Art doing Nothing Happening. It's a mingling. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be basically, it's kind of like an open mic. Art is going to be, there's no speaker, but everybody just comes in, and it's just kind of like, we got this inspiration from Tony Parsons' retreat. There was a mingling room. So people kind of like would talk in between. I'm like, why don't we have that? That's kind of cool. Like everybody just talks, and if you want to share, Art is going to be there. Art's here actually right now. And then tomorrow we have Naho's retreat for 2 days. There's still some tickets to that one if you want to go to nothing.fm. And what's going on with you, Joan? What's coming up next for you?
Nothing. Yeah, I'm enjoying a lot of nothing. Well, actually, I saw Ron Barnett here somewhere, if he's still here, but he did a wonderful, we had a wonderful conversation on his podcast, All Things Contemplative, I think it's called. And he said that our conversation would be going up on December 16th, I think he said. I don't know if he's still here. But other than that, I don't think I have anything like. Several people have asked me who weren't able to make it today if this is going to be recorded and if they'll
It is. It's going to be on YouTube. I'll post it by tomorrow.
Okay.
By tomorrow, the next day.
And you'll send me the link and everything.
I'll send you the link as well. This was a beautiful talk, Joan. I love you.
I love you so much, Emerson. You're just wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Everybody say bye. You can unmute yourself.
And I want to say,
thanks, Joan.
Yeah, and I want to say I really love
John.
Russ's cat. Also. Yeah.
Hi, Joan.
Good seeing everyone.
Shoshana, hi.
Thank you,
Bye.
Joan.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Joan.
Yeah.
So much.
Wish I could
Thank
see
you.
everybody.
Thank you,
today.
Joan.
I haven't
Thank
seen
you,
everybody.
Joan.
Thank you,
Thank
Joan.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
all.
Thank you, Joan.
Emerson. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emerson.
Thank you, Emerson.
Oh, thank
Thanks,
you.
Emerson. Thanks, Joan. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Muchas
Thank you so much.
gracias.
Goodbye.
Thank you, Joan.
Adios.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Joan.
Thank
That was
you.
lovely. That was awesome.
Lovely.
Lovely.
Yes,
Okay.
lovely.
We'll do it again soon.
Okay. Bye.
Okay. There's so many great
Bye.
messages for you here. There's one question that I left, but I'll send it to you.
Okay. I haven't been looking at the chat, but
I'll copy and paste it for you.
okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. All right.
Okay. All right.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone. See
Bye.
you guys
Bye.
next tomorrow if you guys are doing an hour retreat or on next Friday with Art. All right. Take care. I'm going to end the meeting now.